Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. A special welcome to all the officers and the members of the school forum and to those watching online. Just a couple of little bits of admin. So if you can, where possible, keep your cameras on, but mute yourself when you're not speaking. I think if you've got a question, either sort of raise your hand or wave at me, or do the little button that shows a reaction, and hopefully we'll pick it up. If Claudette, maybe if I'm engrossed in something and don't spot someone, if you could just interrupt, that would be great.
I will just share.
Be great. Yes. So welcome to everyone. We'll go through the various little bits of admin, except we are quorate. Although there actually is no decisions to be made today by the schools forum. Apologies for that.
Okay, I received, obviously the chair gives her apologies, hence your chairing. And I received 6 apologies. Cedric, Marianne Curran, Kate Matheson, Rebecca Watkin, Stephanie Williams, and Adarin have given their apologies for not being in attendance today.
Great, thank you. At the risk of setting myself up, I hope it's a fairly light agenda today, so hopefully we won't take the full 2 hours that we've got on the agenda. Yeah, so we'll crack on with that. I think just one only other bit of news, sort of around sort of the welcome that the DfE issued their response to the national funding formula consultation in April. And so we're expecting a bit more information, I think, over the summer in July as to what that will actually mean. There's some sort of changes around split site funding and a few other bits about growth funding and falling roles funding, but there's not a lot of detail in there from what I can see. So we'll wait to see what happens in the summer, and then I'm sure hopefully by the autumn we'll have a little bit more information. But it certainly looks like for 24-25 it's probably still not going to be a hard national funding formula. So that's where we're at. Claudette, anything else on standing business other than apologies or anything else?
Yes, so appointment of new members and resignation. So Joe, you're there. Sorry, I'm on 2 screens. Joe Kingston is there. I think we need to note in the minutes that she's representing the Diocese of Clifton from Holy Cross Primary School. Welcome, Joe. So in respect of vacancies, there are still several vacancies. 1, 2, I think I've counted 3. And we're going to have a vacancy again for a primary governor for the maintained school because Kate Matheson is leaving. So that is just something that's just coming up. She's leaving a role, so therefore she's not going to participate. And the similar with Rebecca Watkin, she's also leaving her role. So we've got quite a few vacancies which we need to advertise and to fill. And I'll give you an update on appointments and any offers at our next meeting, Chair.
Could that go on, Rena? Could that go on your sort of head teacher update, just in terms of vacancies?
Not a problem, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make a note of that, head teachers update. Okay. So those are the vacancies, and I've had no declarations of interest. Obviously, this meeting today, there are no decisions that need to be voted on. And we've got one more person in the voting room. Melanie. Melina. I'll just let her in. Okay, Chair, thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Claudette, and welcome, Joe. Thank you for volunteering to come and be part of Schools Forum. Okay, on to 3 minutes of the previous meeting. I've sort of gone through the actions and the sort of ones for Rena and Angel that they'll pick up in their section. Didn't know whether there was anyone wanted to just raise any issue with them being whether they were an accurate record of our last meeting.
Chair, just to say that Jo Kingston was present at the last meeting and she was noted as not being present. And there were apologies from Jo Willis and she was noted as being present even though she wasn't. So I'll make a note in this minute and just adjust it accordingly. Okay, but I don't think I had received anything else or sounded. If that's the case, just let me know, please.
Okay, so if there's no other queries on there that I can see, no one waving at me frantically, we'll take those as confirmed as a correct record of the meeting. Thank you. Item 4, update from Rena, over to you.
Just try and share my screen. Hopefully colleagues around the virtual table can see a full screen. Oh, wonderful, thank you, Claudette and Chair. You're the only two that I can really see. So please feel free to stop me or tell me that there's a question. And if I can answer it, I will do. If I can't, I will take it away and seek guidance from officers who are overseeing some of the work. So as part of my update, I'll be sharing an update around family hubs, as this was requested in our previous schools forum. So to give you an indication around funding, the funding is over 3 years. As we can see, and the infographic is really there to support some of how that work will continue over the next 3 years. The total of funding available to us is 4.8 million. And what we've tried to do in the infographic is just clearly show what we will be doing, when we will be doing it, in terms of what will happen in year 1, in terms of transformation, and then again in year 2 and year 3. This piece of work, is very exciting in terms of working with local family hubs and trying to set up that provision that we have in place, and to build on some of the strong work that has happened previously in terms of the children's centres. I think this is a key slide that I'd like to just share with colleagues in terms of the milestones that we have to date. And I know that, it's a really exciting time in terms of May and June and having the physical opening of the family hubs, and what will happen and what families will have access to. And just taking a look at what will happen beyond June, as we're preparing for those family hubs to go live, and what will happen with them. And it is about the wider range of those services that we have available, agreeing new partnerships with local voluntary and community and faith sectors, and just having those clear plans set out to ensure that we're taking on board what everyone is saying around this really, I would say, valuable provision that we have in place. So to give a little bit more context around some of the centres that we have available and some of the hubs that we have available, just moving my screen. So we've got a Southmead Children's Centre, Wellspring Settlement, Hartcliffe Children's Centre and Nursery, and it's about the partnership of these groups and what we've been able to achieve in terms of the locality of the hubs. And I think it's really important to emphasise, the multi-agency element that exists within the family hubs. So we do have the local authority involved, as well as how that fits into other agencies with the piece of work around this. And it means that we can meet the needs in terms of what's required. But I think it's really clear that what we have outlined in terms of different partnerships that are involved in the work, I think it's worth recognising where health fits into this, and how we're really trying to work with and triangulate all the work that we do within our family hubs as well. And then finally, just what the next steps look like, and what that work will be and when it will happen. So of course, we've got the Start for Life offer launching on the 28th of June. the development of key materials for families, expanding the support offer that we have in place, and including those wider services, which we know family hubs will serve a real central point for families in terms of what will be on offer for them. And then again, just implementing that shared outcomes framework, ensuring that we're continuing to develop, and ensuring that sustainability as well. I know there is a lot of work happening in the background, and officers are working tirelessly to ensure that we can maximise those family hubs and what we have in place, and having those 3 localities is incredibly important. But of course, you know, any feedback that you can offer around family hubs, you know, when they launch, whether colleagues can get down and take a look, you know, that would be worthwhile. And I know officers would really appreciate that feedback as well. So I'm not sure, Chair, whether yourself or Sarah will be able to get down it and take a look at those hubs and what they look like. You know, it might be worthwhile. And if you need me to, we can facilitate that as well. But I wanted to just give just a few next steps. I mean, there's a lot happening in the background in terms of what officers are doing, but to keep it top line and just, you know, key headlines at the moment, it's really clear that the family hubs are, you know, going down really well in terms of what families and the feedback that we've received, and that co-production in terms of what they will be there to achieve and who we will serve and the different services that we take on board. But any comments that colleagues have, they will be welcomed. Thank you.
Just open that up if there are any questions. Simon.
Yes, thanks, Frida. Well, having just come back from a family hub meeting at Wellspring Settlement as a nursery head, I mean, it is a really positive development, and it's good to sit in a room with all the different agencies, with the health and family support. And, you know, I think going forward, that's really the way to go, so that the people on the ground are talking to each other, and there's a physical presence and a place that parents know they can come and talk to people, so the services aren't remote and, you know, unaccessible. Even though they might be there, they don't feel like they're there sometimes. So I think this is actually putting the services together on the ground where people can meet them.
Yeah.
One of the things that did come up, which I think was one of the last things on your bullet point, was the thing that it's and I know it's early days and we haven't even had the opening launch yet, but people are already talking about sustainability.
Yeah.
And having a strategy going forward for when this funding runs out, so it's not like a cliff edge. So thinking now of a strategy to ensure that these services carry on.
Yeah.
You know, and I know there's so many uncertainties, like changes of government, blah blah blah, and all the rest of it, but I think it also ties in with the thing which maybe Ian Bell will talk about later, about sufficiency, numbers, the extended offer for potentially for children that was announced in the budget, for free entitlements for 1-year-olds, etc. So there's a lot of complex things happening at the same time. So I think really the time to start planning is now.
Yeah, I
thinking
agree
about it going forward. But no, but I agree. It feels like a really positive step, and it would be great if people from the forum could come and visit, actually.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that comment, Simon, and I can see both Denise as my section 151 officer and Angel as well, who will be definitely holding us to account in terms of ensuring that financially these are viable and sustainable as well, and that they are future proofed. But I will definitely take your comments back and share them really clearly, that yes, this is positive and it's great, but we need to ensure that we have sustainability as well. And what does that look like, and what does that strategy need to be in terms of the demographic of Bristol and how we move forward as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Could I just ask you a question, and apologies for the slight ignorance, because this is not an area that I'm particularly au fait with. Can you just explain how the sort of the family hubs and the children's centres, how they work, sort of operate alongside nurseries? They're obviously separate. Yeah, and is that just, it's a separate funding stream, how it works from that perspective?
Yeah, so it is separate, and I think, I mean, oh, sorry, my screen's just jumped around, but I know Simon might chime in at this point. I don't want to say that nurseries don't fulfill the wider wraparound care for families, because they do, in terms of that social care, the health, the advice, the guidance. And I know a lot of nursery schools will provide that for families, but what the Family Hubs does as a model is it almost formalizes that process, where families can tap into the different resources available. And it's not just about an education provision being provided, it is about that social care element, it is about having the health visitors there and being able to really triangulate what should be in place for families, which I believe, Simon, probably some of my nursery colleagues and leaders would probably say they actively do on a daily basis, but don't necessarily have the funding to support that wraparound care that they provide for families. But Simon?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. And I think if you look back to what, say, the children's centres were, it was many things. It's about access, to health visitors, for debt advice, all kinds of support that you might need as a young family with children and you're not sure where to go, etc., etc. One aspect of it is early education. That's just one aspect of it. But obviously, there's no sort of walls between things like, so we will only talk to your child about education. If a parent comes in like upset and they think they haven't got any electricity to that day, or they think their child might have some medical condition, you talk to them about everything. But what's really helpful is to be able to say, well, I can't help you with that, but just down there there's a health visitor, or just down there, or on Wednesday morning there's a debt advisor person coming in, or there's someone from housing, or there's someone that can talk to you about your mental health, and there's a support group you can go to, etc., etc. And I think what sort of happened a bit with the demise of the children's centres was a lot of these services kind of fragmented or disappeared or became remote. So the nursery schools have ended up kind of dealing with it all and not knowing where to signpost people, or signposting people to somewhere where the waiting list is 3 years long.
Yeah.
So really it's trying to bring those things back to the ground. It's kind of logical. It just makes sense. So, I mean, it's the same in a school, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Schools provide lots of kind of different support for parents, and they don't just, I'm only going to talk to you about your child's GCSEs, and I don't care about your mental health, or I don't care about the fact that you're being evicted from your home. I mean, you deal with what comes through the door, and it's good to be able to have services around you that you can, so they're easily accessible to people, and it makes everybody's life easier, particularly for the families involved, so they're not running around trying to find services in all different areas.
What I was going to say as well, so because I had my hand raised, and Simon, you actually were going to mention, no, you mentioned what I was going to talk about as well, which is about the sustainability of this. This is such an important project because of the fact that we've talked a lot about Bristol and the Belonging Project and so on. And if you start at this age, kind of the early family kind of stage, it's going to have such a knock-on effect in terms of outcomes for these young people, but also for families as well. So I'm really excited about the fact that there is sustainability built into this, because there's a lot of families who are crying out for this support. And as Simon says, we all in education, we try and kind of mop it up, but having, as Rena says, that formalized structure there, it just makes things a lot easier. So I would definitely take Rena up on her offer, because I'm not too far from the Hartcliffe one, and it really does make a difference. And I think the more people that can see the amazing work that's done there, the more there is the kind of that impetus and drive to actually think, how can we make this sustainable beyond 2025, because it really, really is an important project. So yeah, it's exciting.
Thanks, Tonya. Rena, is there anything else? You've got another slot on school sufficiency later, but anything else you wanted to update us on?
Not yet, not at this point. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to item 5, the DSG budget monitor and financial outturn. Angel, so this is the sort of the final position for the year ended March 23. So over to you, Angel.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, this is the end of year outturn position between April 2022 to March 2023. As at the end of March 2023, we have finalized our annual accounts, and the DSG entire block is ended the year with a just over £15 million overspend, of which we've got 4 blocks. Schools block, there is a underspend. I'll share a table actually. I can't see it. Let me just check that one again.
Is it not there, Angel?
Yeah, I can't see it. Anyway, I'll talk through. So 4 blocks. The schools block ended the financial year with a £787,000 underspend, mainly coming from growth element, where we put aside over £2 million and we didn't utilize it all. Then we got a de-delegation, which is the money and doesn't belong to the local authority, but belong to the schools contributed to the pot. We started the financial year with a 504,000 surplus. We ended the financial year with 23,000 more in terms of surplus, and that's because we've done some trainings for the academies and we invoiced them. And so we spent 22-23 budget, but you know we had a small surplus of £23,000. So added to the opening surplus balance of 504, so ended the delegation as of March 2023. We've got a surplus of £527,000, of which 335,000 was the contribution from the previous years on the element called schools with financial difficulties, which was on last schools forum. There was a question, you know, what was that fund? You know, how much was it? It was for it's the 335,000 for primary schools. Yeah, contributions made for rainy days when they're in financial difficulty. So when we get to the nursery schools financial positions, and we could have a look at that in terms of how we best utilize the fund, obviously with the support and approval from the forum. Then we've got the central services block. We currently got an overspend carried forward from the previous years. In 22-23, we spent the entire budget and we stick to it, so there is no additional overspend. And in 23-24 budget, I intend to, you know, reduce the spend by 8,000, so to make sure the central services block is spending to the budget really. So then the early years block, we have ended the year with a small surplus of actually underspend of 133,000. Majority of that is I'll just check the exact figure. In May 2022, the forum approved the early years transformation stroke mainstream nursery schools improvement fund, totaling 340,000. So we've got underspend of £267,000 from the transformation fund really, and that this was offset by the 474,000 overspent in early years SEND, so giving you approximately the underspent position in early years of 133,000 in total. The majority of the £15 million in year overspend is from high needs block, as you imagined. where, you know, we reported at the end of March just over £16 million overspent on high needs block, of which majority of it, almost £10 million, is from high needs top-ups, which, you know, the local authority has been proactively dealing with it, in the sense that we've engaged with the ESFA and delivering Better Value for Send program. We've secured just over £1 million to deliver some intervention work, which is well underway at the moment. And we also have the £1.6 million transfer from the schools block to the high needs block for the high needs deficit recovery plan. So that's yeah. And so the plans are in place to tackle the high needs overspend.
Thank you. Could I just ask that? I think just seeing those large numbers on the high needs thing, I think sometimes because we've seen them now for a number of years, although they're getting bigger, you can sort of get a little bit blasé that they just carry on indefinitely. So is it possible, either yourself or Denise, whether you could just explain what the risk is of that? Obviously can't just carry on in perpetuity. What the actual risk?
You're absolutely right. I was just about to get into that. So as the delivering better value, as part of the delivering better value for Send work, and the ESFA partner Newton actually came in and took our 5 years worth of the data, and the first thing they did was check our 5 years forecast, making sure the accuracy and robustness of our financial plan, you know, forecast is. And so their forecast was broadly in line with ours. That's that. And to answer your question, Simon, as we all know, the statutory instrument will end in March 2026, which means that the risk to the local authority is, you know, if we don't deal with the turn the financial position around, and we cannot afford on it, and because we don't have reserves to cover the overspend at this as is, let alone, you know, if the position keep on, you know, deteriorating. So it's a huge financial risk to the local authority. This is why the local authority has been proactively engaging with Department for Education, you know, and a volunteer to be in the first tranche of delivering Better Value for Send program. And
sorry, what specifically is the risk? So we know there is a risk, but what would it look like? I mean, in the news there have been talks of other local authorities that have been in financial situations. So is it something that would be the equivalent in Bristol? I mean, what would it look like if this doesn't get resolved?
Well, do nothing is not the option. If, you know, we do nothing at all, let it carry on. When the statutory instrument ends, the local council will run out of the money. And if you run out of money, bankruptcy in commercial terms.
That's, yeah.
So this is how severe the problem is. This is why, you know, we have been, you know, working and engaging with other local authorities, with Department of Education, to, you know, to tackle the problem based on the modest forecast provided by the Department for Education and partner organization Newton. By 25-26, we are in a position to reach in-year balanced position. So it will take us a bit of time.
Thanks, Angel. I'll come to Denise. Simon, I know you had your hand up first, but I think Denise is probably going just to add to that point.
Yes, hi, thank you, Chair. I think it may be worthwhile if Rena provides us with a very quick update in terms of progress and next steps, and then I can talk through the worst case scenario type position and some of the things that we need to have in place as well to be able to show or demonstrate the right trajectory. But Rena, do you want to just give an update in terms of where we are on the DBV program, and then I'll give an indication of next steps.
So colleagues may remember from March, Schools Forum outlined in the paper that was submitted. There are 2 work streams, so I will try to keep this really simple, Chair, so please stop me if it's too jargonistic and I'm using too many acronyms. So with the delivering better value, there are 2 clear work streams. The first work stream is really about developing the relationships with schools, families, and the young person's voice in particular around the ordinarily available provision, and almost taking a step back and just looking at what we have in place that is available for all young people, so that schools, the local authority, families, that we can triangulate and work as a partnership. So that piece of work is in motion in terms of discussions that we're having around the ordinarily available provision, when we will be speaking to SENCOs, gaining feedback from schools, and whether we need to almost do a little bit of a diagnostic around the ordinarily available provision. That isn't to say that it's not fit for purpose, but it is to recognise that in 2023, from when the document was written, a lot has happened, and the demographic has changed and the picture has changed in Bristol. So I would say work stream 1 is is a softer piece of work, and it's mainly in work stream 2 where Schools Forum, but also finance colleagues will really start to see the financial impact on the deficit that we're carrying. And this is where we're looking at procuring a partner to work with us who will be independent of the local authority, because of the piece of work involved is all around the high needs blocks. So it'll be the top-up fund, the non-statutory top-up funding, funding in terms of post-16, and our special schools funding as well. Tonya, your ears probably pricked up at that point. Obviously, this is incredibly important. It's also incredibly emotive, as well as being political. And I think it'd be remiss of me not to say this is why we're trying to procure a partner, because this isn't a local authority taking any form of judgment around it. It is about ensuring that we are scoping what our options look like, identifying those options, and then going out to consultation, and recognising that that 6 to 8 week window of consultation is key, because we need to hear what Bristolians are saying, what families are saying, what colleagues are saying, and then it will be at that point where we will be able to make that informed judgment about, well, what do we need to do in order to have that significant impact on the deficit. And of course, it will be then that we will go back out and say, well, as a result of the consultation and the work completed by the independent partner, this is what we will be doing to reduce that deficit, and this is what it will look like. This is how you will feel it in terms of impact. This is how families will feel it. This is what it will look like for the children and the young people, which needs to be at the forefront, because and Tonya, I think you might have heard me say this before, it's not an option simply to remove non-statutory funding, because what we've seen with other local authorities is when they've chosen to do that, their EHCP requests, so their assessments and their actual paperwork around EHCs has shot up. Well, that tells us that we've got a disproportionality in terms of what that picture is looking like with our EHCs. So we've got to get this right for our children and young people, as well as our families, as well as, you know, provisions that are putting that education in place for them. So hopefully I've kept that fairly simple top line. What I do want to emphasize is that work stream 2 will go out to consultation. This isn't just going to be a local authority driven piece of work.
Right, thank you, Rena, for that. And that's obviously, hopefully, a quick overview in terms of the programme and the action that's intended. I think I would probably want to start by saying, whilst we recognise it's a national issue, Bristol's DSG deficit is a local issue, and it's one that we must own. as Bristol City Council, but also as schools forum, and you know, and the community more broadly, because it's an issue that we must find a resolution to and we must resolve. So I think recognising that ownership is the key starting point to that road to recovery, but also then thinking about it in two different tranches. I think the first thing that we would all want to see, and I'm sure that you join me in that view, is that we want to see annual financial sustainability. So being in a position where we're able to meet our needs within the annual envelope that has been established for us. And that's some of the first tranches of work that's actually underway, and what colleagues are working on as part of the Delivering Better Value programme. The next stage is then being able to start to deliver on reducing the deficit. And we recognise that this may be a longer term plan because of the scale of the deficit that will be there at that point. We're going to need a longer term plan, and that will also be the area that we develop alongside. And we will have to talk to both, obviously, look at ourselves, but also talk to our auditors, talk to the DfE about that plan and that long term vision, but to be able to give them some confidence and assurance, one, that we have got a plan, clear plan, it's realistic, it's deliverable. And that we're making really good progress on delivering that. I think those are the key points that we need to put into place. And I think, and we also need to continue to monitor it, give the right level of overview, and ensure that the programme doesn't slip, isn't delayed, and that the improvements are in line with what we've sort of set out in terms of the plan. So those conversations are ongoing. We have talked about the DVV programme. There is lots of discussions about the safety valve programme, also lots of discussions about the statutory instrument, the override. I think my focus at the moment is getting a clear, sustainable plan that has credibility, that we can all agree, sign up to, and then we want to align some of those discussions about other alternatives and programmes and how we drive forward the change. Again, as subsequent conversations, I don't want to lose sight of it. They're really important, really key issues in terms of the council's financial position and overarching sustainability. I think providing we're able to have a clear plan and give assurance, I think we're obviously, also part way there. So I think just in terms of where we are, it is, a difficult situation. We know that, we recognise that. And I think what we want to be able to demonstrate is really good, clear, joined up working, and that we are all driving for the same sort of end goal and the improvements that we need to see.
Great, thanks.
Great.
Thanks, Denise and Rena. I'll pass over to members Simon and then Aileen.
Yeah, it was just really. I'll be grateful if you could explain what the statutory instrument is. We keep hearing about it, but and I thought I read somewhere that it had been extended and it was going to be 1 year and then it's been pushed back for another year. And what does it actually mean, and who decides what the statutory instrument is and whether it's applied or not? And what does that mean for us?
Well, I respond, Angel. So if we think of the standard accounting framework and accounting treatment, local authorities don't have the permission to continue to run a deficit programme. So we are legally obliged to ensure that we deliver a balanced budget, we spend within our means, and don't exceed the funds that we have available. In order to enable us to carry a DSG deficit that exceeds the total level of reserves, we've had to have Secretary of State approval to do that, and that is what the statutory instrument is. So it's an instrument laid in Parliament to enable local authorities with DSG deficits to be able to carry an adverse balance, a deficit balance in our books, in our accounts. And the instrument sets out the accounting treatment for that. And also is time limited. Previously, it was due to expire the 31st of March through dialogue with local authorities, also with dialogue with auditors, and the decision was made to extend that for another period of 3 years to enable greater time for the deficit plans to start to actually deliver against the objective and to actually turn the curve and resolve the issue of the deficits.
Very good. Do we know how many local authorities have had that statutory instrument override? Like,
The statutory instrument is something that is available to all authorities that carry DSG deficit. It's laid in Parliament to enable a different accounting treatment for any authority that has a DSG deficit. How many of them have actually utilised it's a different question. How many authorities are carrying a DSG deficit? I don't have that to hand, because I think that's a question that you are asking more so than
yeah,
is that if you have a deficit, then it must be accounted for in a certain area within your account. You can't then offset it elsewhere. But I don't have the details in terms of how many local authorities are in a similar position in terms of the adverse DSG position.
okay, thanks.
Aileen.
Hi, thank you very much. I just have a question about the monitoring of the plans. So we've got 2 more plans that or 2 streams to work on the improvement and reduce the deficit. But what kind of timeline have those got, and how can Schools Forum hold the local authority to account? And the other is, I've just got a question of what does stretched confidence benefits mean, in that in 2025-26 we'll have a balanced budget if DBV stretched confidence benefits materialise. I don't really know what that means. Would you mind explaining that?
So I can take the first question. I can answer the second question. It's whether Angel or Denise want to jump in around that one. I just have a really simple understanding around the stretch and the confidence indicators. But the first one, if I'm right, was around probably, I think it's more of a governance question around the 2 work streams. So what we've created in the Children's and Education Directorate, overseen by the DCS and the Executive Director, Abby Bago, is an Our Families board, which has got a varied membership in terms of those who are invited and those that make up the fora, in terms of colleagues from health, colleagues from social care, as well as colleagues across the board, from auditing to capital finance. It's a varied board, but essentially we meet every 6 weeks. And we have to give an update in terms of the programmes and where we are at with those programmes and the timelines around them, and the milestones that we have set. The big one in terms of work stream 2, procuring that partner, has been timely. We went out for one particular tender to see whether it would be feasible for Newton to continue their work with us, considering they've done the diagnostic and they obviously know our picture in detail. But unfortunately that didn't come into fruition. We're following the process of procurement and ensuring that we're doing that by the book. And therefore that takes a bit of time to ensure that we can gain that partner to work with. So I think this is where we really need to ensure that we can keep the momentum going. The work around work stream 1 has started very much in the background around discussions, identifying officers that can be involved in that. And then my role really is to facilitate both pieces of work and to support with the project officers to make sure that we stick to those milestones, but we are held to account every 6 weeks. And in terms as to where Schools Forum can support us, I think this will be mainly around probably work stream 1 in the first instance, and supporting where colleagues can feed into those discussions, what they might look like, how you might engage with officers completing that piece of work, and maybe chair, bringing the detail around work stream 1 in particular. I'm just thinking about July. It might be a good time when I give the update to provide that, and to just say, colleagues around the virtual screen, if you're able to support, that would be great, because I know DBV is on the next agenda, I believe. And Aileen, if hopefully by then we should have procured our partner, just thinking about the deadlines in my mind. Hopefully I'll be able to give an update. That's what I'm hoping for. But we do have a contingency in terms of if we can't procure a partner, unlike some local authorities that were in tranche 1, they've had, you know, a larger pot of money being given to them to support this piece of work. Ours, you know, I will never say £1 million isn't large. It is large, but it's not as significant as some others. Therefore, some partners may not feel that the value of it is something that they can commit to. However, we are pitching our procurement process at the right level to companies that will be probably more invested in wanting to work with us. But we do have a contingency should that not come into fruition, because I think we need to be able to future-proof what we're doing. If A doesn't work, well, then what's plan B? And then what's plan C? So we have thought that through to give colleagues an assurance around it. And then the question around the stretch confidence, did a nicely segue to my finance colleagues around this one.
Yeah, I can try to take that one.
Thanks, Angel.
No worries. Thank you, Rina. And when we did the diagnostic work with DFE partner Newton, we also forecast the benefits based on the mitigation proposals. We think each of the benefits, and we actually apply optimum bias to the benefits we calculated. Do we have 100% confidence level in terms of, you know, delivering that benefit for in that duration? If we have 100%, we'll say that's a maximum benefit we could deliver for that mitigation proposal. And there is 3 categories of the confidence level. There is a maximum, there is the stretch confidence, and Eileen, you just raised. There is the lower band confidence level. So the stretch confidence one is just the one in the middle. So we moderately confident in delivering the mitigation proposals. And that's that. Hope that helps. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. It's not worst case scenario. It's not best
It's
case
not the
scenario.
best,
It's something in the
moderate.
middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great,
No worries.
thank you. Just to clarify, so there wasn't a paper that we produced for officers produced on DBV specifically, because there was thought that it was presented back in the last one. There wasn't enough of an update to rewrite that paper, but it will come back in July's meeting. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I had 2 questions, one specific and one general one. So the general one, as Rina, you presented a sort of right complex series of work streams last time, and I'm interested in what are your feelings, sort of 3 months on, whether you feel that's directionally good. Yeah, that's generally the question. And then the second one is just help me understand what sort of animal are we looking for in this partner.
Right, okay. I don't always understand idioms, but hopefully the second part of your question, I'll be able to tackle that one. So the first part, in terms of 3 months on, where are we at? We're moving in the right direction. You know, I will always be cautious. And I won't overpromise and underdeliver. I think it's incredibly important with the numbers that we're dealing with to, yes, provide assurance, but also to be realistic. We are monitoring the risk that exists if we can't procure a partner for work stream 2, which is why we have a contingency that we can fall back on. In terms of work stream 1, you know, I've nominated an officer that can support that piece of work. We've also got a SEND improvement officer who is working on that. So in the background, a number of pieces of work are happening, but I'm very aware of what the optics look like and what schools are seeing and hearing, and we're at that crucial point now where we need to go out. And post half term, that's when, you know, communications will be going out in terms of Senkos, and just a bit of a test run, rather than a pilot per se, will be shared with some Senkos. So in short, to answer your question, I'm cautiously I'm cautiously in a good place, but I don't want to overpromise, and I definitely don't want to mislead or suggest that there's not a risk, particularly around work stream 2 and procuring a partner. In terms of what type of animal we're looking for, I hope I get this one right, considering this is a filmed and a public forum. So we are looking for someone who will be forensic and granular in terms of the options that they can generate, whilst appreciating and hearing the families and the voices of Bristol, because this is an incredibly sensitive issue, and rightly so. But we also need to recognise that financially we cannot continue in the position that we are in. Therefore, we need someone who is finely balanced, refined and forensic. I'm not sure what type of animal that is, but hopefully that clarifies what we're looking for in terms of traits.
Yeah, that's fine. That's very good. Thank you.
I will think of an animal and get back to you.
Thanks, Rena. Conscious that this is your section, Angel, and you haven't spoken for about 20 minutes. I just wondered, in your section, if there's anything else. I think the two things that you were going to touch on, following on from last meeting, that you've added a section there about the breakdown of the maintained schools balances between nurseries, primaries, children's centres, nurseries, etc. So maybe you could just touch on that, and just to reiterate that those in deficit there are not included in the schools block balances. And also, I think you were just going to also talk about the schools in financial difficulty kind of pot.
Chair, sorry to interrupt, Angel. Sorry, Chair. Tonya, you had your hand up. I don't know if that was still up or whether that was a different question.
Yeah, I did, but Chair, if you want Angel to go ahead, then that's
no,
fine.
sorry, go on. Sorry, I missed that. Apologies, Tonya.
Oh, that's okay. It was just one last question, and in regards to the planning around. So, Rena, you talked about the fact that this is going to be quite difficult, and is part of the planning then working around supporting families and schools around understanding that actually there's going to be some hard times ahead, and how do we ensure that you've got all that partnership working when, because this will be, as you said, very, very emotive, but at the end of the day we're talking bankruptcy, so that there has to be some kind of give and take. So has that been planned as well?
Yeah, and I think we're probably in a time place where the announcement was made around Bristol Parent Carer Forum being given their official title as being the Parent Carer Forum for the local authority by the DFE. Last Wednesday, I believe that announcement came out. So they will be a good touch point for us in terms of, I would say, bringing into that co-production of these are the options that have been generated. How can we communicate really clearly with families, and using them as almost that critical friend to say, well, we've drafted X. Is this suitable? Is it accessible? Do we need to tweak it? What does that look like? And I think it's about that partnership that we have in place, but also utilising key groups that we already have in place, like Excellence in Schools group, such as the head teachers briefings, such as a CEO meeting that Abby and I are both part of. And I think it's utilising all of those different forums to ensure that the messaging is clear, and that it's not hidden behind some jargon that we have in place, because that can be really difficult for families to try to decipher. And some of the work that we're looking at, the project manager who is working with us on it, is actually looking at how we can articulate that and also present it back to external partners, so that colleagues can see how it actually fits in with our belonging strategy, because that is something that everyone has clarity around. So yeah, I take on board what you're saying, Tonya. It's a conscious decision, everything we're doing, and to utilise the different partners around the table as well. But as always, I'd like to think that colleagues know that we're very open to feedback. We're we're humble, we will learn through the process, but at the forefront of this has got to be the children and the young people.
I'm keen to move on, but Trish, you've got your hand up. If we can be reasonably quick, that would be great.
Very quick comment, actually, just to say, isn't one of the issues that we have in Bristol the fact that we've had inconsistent leadership for many years, and then different leaders bring in a different take on things. Some key people have left Bristol, and what Bristol needs, because of the complexity of our schools, is consistency. And it would be really good to see that we had consistency in the leadership of education in Bristol.
Hard to argue with that.
Pardon?
Hard to argue with that. I think. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? It's not necessarily the fault of anyone who's here, and we wish Rena and Abby long tenures.
It's happened, and we've now, I believe, Rena, you are still interim, and it's just, we go around talking about different projects. They come back recycled in different names when different people come over the last 5 years, and Bristol is a great place, and it's a great place for education, and our children deserve the best, and they need consistency of approach.
I completely agree, and I think this is where it shouldn't be about the person or the leader, but the sustainability of the actual work that's taking place. And I'd like to think that, you know, both Abby and I, as well as, you know, other officers that are on the virtual screen as well, that we will bring that stability that's being called out for. And I think there is absolutely nothing that I could ever argue with in what you've said, Trish, and I appreciate it and take it on board, because consistency and stability will only ever lead to progress around it, and hope progress in the right direction as well.
Thanks, Simon. Hopefully got a quick point as well.
It is a quick one, but I just wanted to
I've worked in Bristol for many years as a school improvement officer, and you know, you see the clock go round and round again, and a passion for these children and these schools, and the staff in schools and the staff in the local authority that really work hard to make these schools good. It would be good to get some consistency. I know every leader that's come is great, but there's obviously a different take in it, and then there's all the external pressures. Just be good to get some consistency.
Is it worthwhile? I think it's possibly an unfair question for Rena, but I think reality, we don't want to spend a lot of time looking back, but we need to be moving forward together. And that's what we want to do as a collective. So how do we move forward to turn the curve and make the changes that we want to see as a collective? We recognise the points that you've made, Trish, and we couldn't fault those. But it's possibly not the question for Rena, but if we agree as a collective that the direction of travel going forward and how we can collaborate to deliver those improvements.
Right, it's fun.
That was just a quick point I wanted to make, because often it seems that the SEND thing seems to sit as the big problem for education, whereas our experience is often the problem is with the waits people have to see health services, and that and then they affect that, and the impact that has on us, because we can't get the diagnosis, and then we can't get the speech and language support we need, and those are the things that sort of seem to sit outside our control, but are putting a lot of pressure on us, which in the spirit of looking forward, I'm hoping that the kind of joined up working more around things like family hubs will begin to ease that pressure, and then that will feed into a more stretched confidence value or whatever it is, because you can see, well, what if those things start working and those things start joining up, that should start relieving pressure in other ways, which will then mean that a lot of the SEND work in schools will be more effective and better and less frustrating. So I think it's about joining these things up.
I think, Simon, and sorry, Chair, this will take 2 seconds, but I think we talked about this in the last meeting, because I think I raised that exact point about the fact that it's an EHCP, and that's where these things are coming from. But where's the health and where's the care? And I think at that point, there was a discussion about making sure that those partnerships come in as well, so it's not all just falling on the education part of it. That was
Thanks.
my understanding anyway.
Thanks, Tonya, Simon. Angel, if I just get you to just do those last couple of bits, that would be great, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I just want to add a comment to Tonya's, as we already seen Family Hub's approach, we are engaging, external partners and third parties as well to work collectively to tackle the problems. And going back to the finance, then yes, there's a section on the report about the LA maintained schools. Currently, we're reporting an in-year deficit of £5.3 million for the 60 LA maintained schools and 4 hubs and 1 children's 5 hubs and the children's centres. Yeah, so that the key problem lies within the nursery schools, as we reported to you at the budget round in January 2023. So we have since been working with this schools and the nurseries in financial difficulty, and all of them has submitted their recovery plan. We are just finished our year-end closing, and this week, right this moment, we're writing the letters to notify schools, the next steps in terms of, how to bring their finance back on track, really. Yeah, schools should hear from us very soon. Yeah, and that's the LA maintained schools. And I would also like to point out that within the finance report, there's a section dedicated for DSG management plan. And it was a separate paper before, but because of the changes, it's not significant to be on a separate paper. So incorporated in section 3.7 of my report to give you the overall position in terms of DSG management plan. The forecast 5-year cumulative deficit still at £128 million, which is probably in line with a DFE and partner Newton's forecasts, and then the potential mitigations is around about £80 million. So we're still looking at a gap of £47 million at 27-28. That's in section 3.7 of my report. And I'll quickly round this up. So in summary, DSG ended the financial year with an in-year deficit of £15 million, added to the £24.7 million deficit carried forward from previous years. So we will have a cumulative reserve balance, deficit reserve balance on DSG of about £39.7 million. In terms of transformation, what we're doing about it, so we've got £1 million from delivering better value for send, £1.6 million from transformation fund, from schools block to the high needs block in 23-24, plus there is the education transformation fund, now it's called belonging with send. There is an underspent just short of £1 million. So we've got about £3.5 million in terms of funding set aside to tackle the high needs overspend. In addition, we've got £267,000 left from the early years stroke maintained nursery schools transformation fund to deal with the deficit issues. And Simon mentioned earlier on in the beginning about the national funding formula change. So our funding transfer from a schools block to a high needs block may not be possible with the introduction of national funding formula. So we have about 3 years to get this right. So we need to work together to find a way to utilize the money sensibly and to make sure that the children and young people's needs in their city is met within their financial envelope. And that's it from me.
Thanks, Angel. I think that table you've got at the top of page 9, that you talk about that 5 million a year sort of deficit of those schools. It's a really worrying sign. It's consistent with what I see in the whole sector, whether that's academies, maintained schools. It's really worrying, and it's hard to. I'm also very aware how easy it is for someone to produce a budget that actually shows a recovery that might not be based on reality. So, you know, obviously this is something that you do in terms of your monitoring of those maintained schools, but I just, yeah, will reiterate, you know, early monitoring of that, of their progress against those budgets this year, really, because yeah, there's some quite worrying figures. I know obviously the nurseries have it's been very aware, and I know colleagues have been working with them on their recovery plans, but I don't know to the extent of how close you work alongside the likes of primaries and other maintained schools from that respect. But yeah, worrying times. So you're on mute, Angel.
We've been working with all the schools, including nurseries, in financial difficulties, to support them deliver the recovery plan. The good news is, which is included in the paper, is that the government did give additional funding and mainstream schools additional grant, and Bristol allocation is around £10 million, which should alleviate majority of the pressures in primary and secondary school. And the nursery will get additional grant, 1.6 million mainstream, yeah, and the supplement funding. However, obviously the in-year deficit was £1.8 million plus, you know, cost of living, ongoing pressures on salaries. So the transformation in nurseries will be fundamental to the sustainability of the nursery schools.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Angel. On to the next item. Yes, sorry.
Sorry, could I ask a question?
Go for it.
Yeah, sorry, it's two questions really. Firstly, Angel, you mentioned that local maintained schools are going to have a letter sent to them with regards to this year's finances, etc.
Yeah.
Given the fact that we're just this week likely to be sort of submitting all our budgets, what is the expectations of local maintained schools then? Because we would have already, if you like, pulled all our figures together.
Depends on the level of the financial difficulties you're experiencing, and so there'll be tailored letters sending to the schools. Some of them will be awarded, for instance, you know, a license deficit.
Angela, it's possibly better to wait until the letters arrived and then for Abby to convene a meeting where it's necessary, rather than to try and second guess every letter. But just say that we're responding to the submission that came to us and the overarching position, and the letter will clearly set out the next steps for each respective school, and where a meeting is required, then that will be convened by the Director of Children's Services.
Okay, because what I was going to say is we haven't submitted our Q4 final outturns yet, or obviously the budget. So I just wondered what these figures will be working on.
So the outturn, well, the accounts have closed, so outturn details would have been submitted for those that are required to submit, or where we needed to have the details, because assumptions would have been made in relation to the overarching, where the schools or setting was in deficit. Then recovery plans were requested. They were requested at Q3. They've been reviewed again in relation to the Q4 outturn, and a detailed proposal coming back to each in terms of the next steps.
Okay, thank you. And the second one is, and I think this was the point that was brought up earlier on with regards to the fund, if you like, for schools in financial difficulties. I'd like to put a proposal forward that if we're looking to use that fund, that it gets returned to the local maintained schools currently still with the local authority at a pro rata rate, you know, as we pay into those things for, you know, per pupil to return it to those schools, because without a shadow of a doubt, I'm sure that every one of them would make use of it to reduce their costs at the moment.
I think that'll be a discussion and, you know, a consideration for the forums to agree on. It's not a local authority's decision entirely, I would assume.
And I would say that if we are going to make a decision, if we decide to do anything, that it should go out to consultation to all the local maintained schools, if you like, who subscribe to that over the years to make a decision.
Can we have that as a separate thing to look at the next meeting then, in terms of what the options are for the use of that fund? That's obviously only available to maintain schools, but yeah, could we have the options around what needs to be done around consultation, perhaps? Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Ian, thank you very much for your patience. I'm sure you enjoy all those number talks. I don't know if you're leading this bit or Rena about school sufficiency.
Yeah, Chair, it'll be me that will be presenting the paper. So you can breathe now, Ian. So I didn't want to put you on the spot there, but for colleagues around the virtual table, so I do have my two key officers with me, Ian, who can answer any questions in more detail than myself around sufficiency of primary, secondary and post-16 planning. And then of course I've got Jessica Taylor, who can answer any queries or questions that we have around the specialist provision and what we've got in place there and targets around that. I think because this might generate lots of discussion, Chair, I will just pull out some of the pertinent points, but colleagues, if there's anything in particular that you want to just draw attention to, then please feel free and stop me. So I'll take us all through the paper, and as we can see from the summary, and we all know this because we all feel it in terms of the continuing rise in demand for secondary school places. It is worth acknowledging that 92% were offered their preference school, with 76% being offered their first preference, which is a slight reduction on the previous year, but only by 1%. We have acknowledged the two new free schools that have opened in September, and I'll touch upon that admissions process as well. So the admissions process for those two new free schools is outside of the regular coordinated process, as some parents and families and carers may have applied to both through the local authority system, but also to the free schools as well. And that process will be coordinated to ensure that any of those spaces are freed up where they need to be once offers have been accepted. But all applications go through that coordinated response. We do end up with the free schools, therefore some families having those two offers, but officers at the local authority are working with Oasis to establish which offer those families will choose, which will then ensure that we have accuracy around a number of free spaces that we can continue to offer out to other families. It's worthwhile touching upon some of the capital works that was required for some schools as a result of their need to, continue to admit over their published admission numbers. Some of that work is still to be completed, and I wanted to draw colleagues' attention to that. There's a number of reasons that have been outlined in 3.4. But the opening of the free schools, as we can see in 3.5, is that it should mean a large reduction in the numbers of additional places being needed in 2024. But it would be remiss of me not to outline where that forecast shortfall happens and is placed within the north of the city. So we can see that there is a trend of reduction in the numbers of pupils requiring a place at reception. And we know that we've got 99% of our pupils who've been offered their preference school, excuse me, with 92% being offered their first choice. Further work, and I will touch upon this later on, is happening with schools and trusts to coordinate the management of surplus primary places. So I will come to that and hopefully be able to answer questions and queries regarding, what is the plan and how we're working with partners to ensure that we have a future-proofed plan in place around sufficiency. So there continues to be good progress in terms of sufficiency for special educational need places. And those figures have been set out for you in 3.7 in terms of 162 places delivered so far. And with capital works, the forecast to deliver 501 places is set, and we're on trajectory for that for September 2025. The increase that we've talked about at the beginning around secondary school places, it is worth acknowledging that at some point, we are going to start to feel that impact on demand for post-16 places. And then also being able to review our geographical areas that we need to take into account some of that catchment work. And we are working with, I should say, with trusts to take a look at that piece of work, you know, and what we need to do to ensure that we are capturing all the voices in terms of catchment areas with our secondary schools. Now, section 4 gives us a little bit of context in terms of the rise in numbers and where we've seen the impact on our pupil admission numbers and the delay in free schools. But I wanted to just draw attention to section 4.3, just in terms of the free school and where I know there have been some queries regarding the sites of those free schools. So Ian has outlined really clearly in 4.3 that although both schools are opening, that they will both open on temporary sites from September 2023, but planning permission is in place for permanent sites, and they've both been outlined for colleagues. Sections 4.9 to 4.11, I just wanted to have a little bit of a focus regarding the locality areas and what the impact is around that. So, for example, for East Central, the delays of capital funding being agreed has been a lengthy process. You know, I do wish to publicly thank Bristol Brunel for the increase in their numbers that they have taken historically for us, but unfortunately we were unable to agree an increase for additional numbers for September 2023. But both City Academy and Bristol Metropolitan Academy did agree some additional numbers. So together with our Temple Quarter free school, we can ensure sufficiency in that area. And with the free schools in place, it should mean that schools aren't having to over-admit from their PAN that has been agreed in the future. In the north, there are some projections regarding continued deficit of places. Works to redesign spaces have occurred. The opening of Oasis Temple Quarter should help to accommodate some of those pupils in the area as well. The south area continues to experience some overcapacity for a number of years, but the situation has changed, and with an increase in pupils requiring places. So the new Daventry Road Free School will ensure sufficiency in the future, but some capital works is required to ensure sufficient space for both our secondary and our special school pupils on Bridge Learning Campus, the new Fossway site as well. I just want to be able to touch upon 4.13 as well, to provide some assurances regarding the proposal to close St Barnabas Primary School. And I know we've got our school business manager on the call as well, so hopefully Mel will be able to support some of the next comments in terms of the plan that was put in place to support both the young people, families, but also colleagues at the school regarding the closure and what would happen, and ensuring that the local authority still plays an active role to support that process, to ease the transition from opening to closing. You know, we have to acknowledge that it's not an easy decision that has been taken to close the school, but hopefully colleagues at St Barnabas have felt supported in that process and have some assurances put in place regarding the next steps and what that looks like, and the officers involved in that. So we've got some forecasting figures that have been shared in sections 4.18 to 4.20 that I wanted to share with colleagues. But before I get to you know, what are we doing and what does the plan look like post this, I just want to be able to touch upon our special school, but also our post-16 numbers and figures, and what does that look like. So we know there's been a rise in demand for EHCs. So that's our education and healthcare plans. And we know that the rise is significantly above that which would be expected from the rise in the general school population. Existing special school provision across the city has been at or very close to capacity, and there is an increase in places, and we know that that demand is there. So significant progress has been made to increase that SEND provision. We've got 282 places have been delivered already, with the remainder of that forecast between September 2023 and September 2025 will meet the need that we've outlined earlier on. And then finally, around the demand for post-16, as I said, we are going to start to fill those numbers and the demand for places. So what we've currently got is, we know that the demand in secondary will be met in terms of, or the demand will be there in terms of post-16. The current figures and the projection only takes into account pupils registered at school's sixth forms in Bristol, and it doesn't include young people attending CLF post-16 provision, the City of Bristol College or St Brendan's College. So the projections might be slightly higher than the actual numbers. So projections have been shared with colleagues in the table in 4.27. But what we wanted to be able to share with colleagues is that post-16 numbers will vary because with many sixth forms operating well above the notional capacity, and they do have a bit more flex in terms of their timetabling as well as capacity, but to provide some assurance in terms of that increase in demand, both Oasis Temple Quarter and Trinity Academy have sixth form in the future plans, have sixth form availability. And of course, as said, our Temple Quarter has sixth form provision built in as well. But I know colleagues will be really interested in terms as to, well, you've outlined the sufficiency and you've outlined the demand that's in place, but we've also got to be aware of the decrease in primary numbers. So what are we doing about that? And I know that was a question raised at the previous schools forum. So we are currently working with some trusts across Bristol, the majority of the trusts, if I'm honest. A couple of meetings have taken place with some CEOs across those trusts in terms of sufficiency and what are we going to do. We are looking to procure a team that will work with us to just do a little bit of diagnosis around primary place planning and what that sufficiency could look like, but also what opportunities are in place, particularly with those numbers decreasing at primary. Therefore, what are the options that could be presented, and what would that look like to ensure sufficiency? Because the end goal, as colleagues will know, is never to close a school. Therefore, we want to be able to, I would say, work with colleagues across the city to ensure that we have a future-proof plan regarding primary schools. That work has started. It is in its infancy in terms of, we've spoken to a company that has worked with a number of local authorities nationally, particularly I know Sheffield was mentioned, but all across the country, a lot of work with some of the larger trusts as well have taken place. So we've tapped into our resources in terms of other local authorities to see what they have done, and alongside the work that Ian has done, we can take a look at some of the projected figures and then work out what are our options and how can we utilise some of that primary place planning work that we've done. But once that work formally happens, I'll be able to bring an update to schools forum around that and what that actually looks like and what does that mean for primary places, and what the impact will be on the young people as well. But unless there are any specific questions, if I don't know the answer, then I will definitely ask Ian or Jess to step in to answer your question or query.
Any questions? I have one. Just you haven't touched on whatever it was a couple of weeks ago when with the latest free school round that Bristol was in the list of free schools approved for opening. And can you just talk about whether this is for Jess or you, Rena, what the next steps are for that? Because is it that you'll find a partner locally to deliver that free school, or how will that work?
Shall I take this one, Rena? So we're actually holding an engagement event tomorrow at City Hall, which will outline the process. But but all trusts throughout the country are invited to bid to run the new free school. I believe the pre-application needs to be complete by the 16th of June, and then the application needs to be submitted to the DFE by the 31st of August. Create Schools can support with that process as well with those bids. And it will actually be the DFE who is the decider in the trust that will run that new special free school, but the local authority will be involved in every step.
Great, thank you. Simon. You're just on mute, Simon.
I was just wondering where the sort of early years sufficiency fits in with all of this, because I know we talk about primary and secondary and post-16 special schools, but there is a big issue also around early years sufficiency of places. And I know you say there's no indication of falling birth rate will rise in the foreseeable future, but I think we've mentioned it before, the birth rate's different in different parts of the city. And not being facetious, but that could all change in 9 months, really. And I do remember going back to 2012-13 when we had a huge number of children going through nursery, and that wasn't really flagged up. You know, we didn't know this in advance that this was happening to us, but all I can say at the moment is we're full for the first time ever for September. Now, that's never happened before. There's more children. I've seen loads of people coming through with babies. I don't know where the data is on all of this now and where it sits, and who's taking kind of responsibility for making sure the sufficiency for early years in Bristol is particularly with the increased offer coming in next year. Are there going to be sufficient places? And what's, you know, we don't really know. And what is the birth rate in different areas of the city? Because it definitely is higher in some areas than others. And I just wondered, does this sit with within education? Does this sit within social care? Because I don't know, it's a split sort of thing. You've got the private nurseries, but maintained schools sit under education. Nursery schools sit under education. We don't really, you know, we have to make sure that we can offer sufficient places. So I don't know how all this is joining up in terms of sufficiency, because at the moment we just seem to be being left out of it.
Ian?
Yeah, so there is, as you know, Simon, an early years team, and they do sufficiency work, and there's the early years and childcare sufficiency survey work that they do, which should flag up where there are issues in terms of obtaining places. We do work, you know, I work with them, but probably over the last year or two, that's got a little bit more disjointed than it could be. So we have had discussions with them about linking in better again with them in terms of the birth rates, because the birth rates do vary across the city. Our primary projections, which are split up into the school place planning areas, which are made up of about between 2 and 4 wards, basically between 2 and 4 council wards. They do have built into them the different different population forecasts down to low super output areas. So those do vary because of the local circumstances. But overall, what we find is the general trends are very similar across the city. I know they do go up and down, and different areas have different birth rates, but the general trends have been declining across the whole city, and there isn't too much variation from that actually in areas. The other thing that we're looking at for with early years colleagues asked us to look at is housing, because we know we've got a lot of new housing planned for the city and currently being built in some areas. Now the numbers generated from new housing aren't as huge as some people sometimes think, but a lot of those would tend to be early years places that are needed. So we're working with colleagues on that, because a lot of our new housing is small. So as families grow and and the children get older, they will tend to move out to other areas. But certainly does generate some more demand on early years places for some of the new housing. So yes, we are working with colleagues on it to try it. So hopefully we'll be able to give you something a little bit more in line with what we're doing with primary and secondary in future.
Right, Mel.
Sorry, just unmute. Yeah, I just really wanted to come back with a comment really to Rena, and thank you for acknowledging St Barnabas closure. Obviously it has been and it will be a really difficult time for, you know, the pupils, the families, and for the staff, some of whom have never worked anywhere else, and many of whom have been there for a very long time, much longer than myself. I just to come back with a bit of a comment, and I mean, hopefully, as you said, you know, it's a hard decision to close the school, and hopefully that is not something that we're going to have to regularly do or oversee, you know, as a council and see within the schools forum. But you know, there have been positives and negatives to the process. I would say that the families have been supported in finding new school places for their children, and being able to move to those school places sort of hopefully as rapidly as possible. So that has worked very well. We have also had you know, HR support and meetings within the school for the staff. And myself and the head teacher have now attended a cross-directorate meeting, and we have another one to come, but I would say as a learning point for the future, there does need to be a clear process for any kind of closure. There needs to be clear indicators about what is the responsibility of the school, what's the responsibility of the council, and in our case, what is also the responsibility of the diocese, because you know, we've got split ownership of the site. And yeah, from a personal point of view, myself and the head are finding that a lot of the responsibility is still falling on our shoulders. So the actual physical closure of the school and everything that entails in terms of premises, etc. It does very much feel like it is my job, which it may well be, but I think just a learning point, you know, if we have to go through this in future, and obviously I've worked closely with many people who are on this call, including Ian and yourself, Rena, is just to have you know, a very clear process, because there is obviously a DFE process for a closure, for announcing a closure, putting up notices for closure, but it's all the practical things that come after. And I'm also going to take the opportunity while I'm on here to say that we obviously do have lots of resources at our school, and lots of people here from other educational establishments, and if anyone wants to contact me over the next term, if you're interested in having resources, then this is as good an opportunity as any to let you know that, you know, you're very welcome to contact me and come and see what we have. And also like to say thank you to the schools, some of which are represented here, who have taken our children. So thanks.
Thanks, Mel. Joe, you've got your hand up as well.
Hi, yeah, I just like, Ian and I have spent a long time talking about places, especially in the south. Just the speed of the plan really for you know, dealing with the overcapacity, the over-sufficiency. As you know, I'm a head of a single form entry school, and talking to other colleagues in the same situation, we are seriously worried about, you know, the fact that there will be a repeat of more single form entry schools closing. You know, our budgets are stretched to the absolute limit, and with the capacity around us of larger schools, of larger trusts, we do really feel the pressure of, you know, having to merge classes, which then becomes a less attractive option for parents, and it means that the falling role situation causes more and more pressure on head teachers. And just, you know, I feel like it's been a number of years now that we've been having this conversation about scaling down. When the schools were scaled up, there wasn't a strategic overview of scaling the schools back down again, when, you know, the birth rate fell again, and now we're in this position where the birth rate has fallen. Second year in a row we've got very low numbers. it's going to be the same again next year. And as Ian said, there's no plan for it to increase in the future. So just how quickly that strategic plan is going to actually be put into action, please.
So we're working quite quickly, literally from one week to the next. We've either had an update or questions around, what our clear objectives are. And Joe, I think the point that you make around the concern of being a single form entry, it's a really fair comment to make. The agreement was made with CEOs that this was a Bristol strategy that they were all invested in terms of not wanting to get to the point where they're having to close schools, and therefore acknowledging where larger trusts that have multiple form entries really needed to look at what that Bristol picture is and investing and committing to saying, okay, well, if we reduce our entry, by one form, it means that a local school that has a single form entry doesn't feel that impact, because then the spread is wider. So, I can say that colleagues are having those vested conversations where they are thinking more about the rest of Bristol rather than just themselves and their only trust. We are looking to formalise some of the desired objectives that we outlined, and what that would look like in terms of a memorandum of understanding, so that we have that absolute clarity around what we're all committing to, and making sure that we move forward with this at speed and with that pace as well, whilst also, as both Denise and Angel are here, operating within our budget envelope to complete this piece of work, and also ensuring that financially it is supported by trusts, as well as the local authority, to ensure that we can have something a bit more concrete that doesn't have that negative impact on primary schools, and keeping that lines of communication open as well, and making sure that we're including as many head teachers in those conversations. But we do want to make this work. We do want to be able to work with colleagues and have something that doesn't have the end impact of having to close schools. But obviously that diagnostic piece of work hasn't been done yet, so I can't foresee, what is being said, but I can say, morally, that's not what we want to do. And hopefully that gives you some reassurance, but I am happy to keep bringing updates with that work to the schools forum.
Thanks, I think the time constraint about admissions policies, about if you want to reduce your PAN, you can't do that very quickly, that there are extra time constraints there, which means that it's a longer piece of work already without further barriers. Again, I know there's nothing we can do about that, but it is just something to bear in mind, that school can't say, I'm going to reduce my PAN by a class for September. It is quite a complicated system.
Yeah. And there's obviously the consultation period as well.
Yeah. Tonya.
Thank you. It was just, rather than a question, it was just a comment really, and it's kind of following from what Tris was saying earlier about the fact about sustainability and consistency and so on. It really is a bit like the kind of high needs budget and so on. The Sufficiency project, it really does need a consistent approach. And is there anything with all of these plans really that has got succession planning built in, that kind of future-proofs it from somebody else coming in with a different strategy and so on? Because these things are always going to be the same, like that we'll have rising populations, then falling populations. It looks like there's going to be more and more pupils who are going to have complex needs and so on. And so my concern with all of this is, if there isn't that kind of written kind of commitment somewhere that's kind of in place, then who's to say in 2 or 3 years' time we're out back trying to get another consultation done and so on, and the issues haven't been addressed yet. I'm hearing a lot about planning, getting people's voices and so on, but as sorry, your name's gone now, but I think, yeah, Joe, as you said, this is not new. Some of the discussions that we're having, they're not new at all, and I just worry that 3 or 4 years down the line we'll be back here again with a different group of people sitting around, and I just want to make sure we're not having to just redo everything again, and because the children and our city deserve more than that. And so it's just an observation really. Is it going to be put in any of the planning? Because I would like to see that, so that whoever is in charge, whether they're interim, permanent, whatever, it isn't going to be a change and it's like, let's just revisit this again, let's go out to consultation, let's do this, and in the meantime we're wasting time that way. So just a comment really.
Okay, thanks. And Trish.
Actually, Tonya, you've actually said the things that I was going to say, that in review, maybe Bristol need to review and I've got Ian there, that I know Ian really well, how we addressed the rise in numbers of primary pupils and provided the places. And now we're looking at how we provide the secondary places, but also when you do that, bearing in mind that rise will then become a fall, which has happened with the primary places in Bristol. Hence the sad demise of a school I love, St Barnabas, which was the most wonderful one-form entry community school, and it's fallen victim to that, lowering in numbers of primaries. But when we had the rise in number of primaries, we extended the places nearby, and then somebody has to fall on the sword, don't they? And unfortunately, it's been St Barnabas in that area, which I'm very, very sad about. And I know Melanie well, and I feel sad about that because it was such a vibrant community school. But I'm sure Ian has been through these processes many times, and it's maybe that we've all got history to look back on, that when we next have a rise in primary numbers, we look at it in a different way, so it becomes sustainable when there's a lowering. Likewise, nursery numbers, early years numbers, secondary numbers. But so I really resonate with what Tonya said. Thank you.
I think we obviously need to give council time. That it's a positive step that they're having this group with the trust. The feedback I've heard from one or two of the trusts I've spoken to is there is a willingness for everyone to do their bit for the city, not just work in their own trust silo or the local authority silo. So yeah, it'd be good, Rena, just to keep us up to date with the progress on that, I think.
Of course, Chair.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or points? Okay. Trish, is that hand from? Oh yeah, it's gone down now. Okay, thank you. On to any other business. I don't have any other business raised, and given the time, I don't plan, unless there's anything. Angel, sorry, you've got something.
Just a very quick update to the forum. I just wanted to mention that we've delivered the Finance DSG training on April 24th to the Schools Forum members. So if there is any feedbacks, please let me know. And obviously, future sessions could be arranged depending on demand as part of our improvement program. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Angel. I think on that note then, I'll thank members and officers here for your contribution. Thank you very much. And thank you, Claudette, as well, your first Schools Forum. And just wanted to thank Sam, who isn't on here, but who clerked for us previously, and wish you all a pleasant evening.